Hey, it's Coach Anderson here again from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to pick up, of course, with Unit 3, Urban America, and then lesson number 5, the farm problems of the late 1800s. We've talked a little bit about what it was like living, of course, in the 1800s during the Gilded Age, and we also talked a little bit about some of the issues in terms of looking at politics and government in the Gilded Age. Today we're going to talk about farmers and their plight during the late 1800s, or what we call the Gilded Age. What we have, of course, is unit focus question. As we always say, the unit focus question is going to guide our thought process throughout the unit. We won't answer it now. We will at the conclusion of the unit, though. The two questions: why do people migrate? And how is urban life different from rural life? What we have today is our journal activity. The Do Now activity says, can you remember improvements in farm technology that made farmers more productive? And the hint was the Great Plains. We'll give you a few moments to go back and see if you can remember what some of those improvements were, and then we'll come back in a moment and we'll discuss them. Okay, well, you should have had enough time that you were able to go back, and if you remember, during this particular period, we were talking about, of course, when westward expansion was happening and farmers, of course, were moving to the Great Plains, they called it the Great American Desert. And one of the things that we told you that it was a dry region, it was a grass region, and there were all sorts of problems that farmers had. We didn't know it at the time, but we eventually found out that some is the best farmland, of course, in the United States of America, for that matter, in the world. So when we look at that, some of the things that had to happen, of course, for us to make it easier, of course, to farm that particular region, things like the steam plow, things like a reaper, things like threshers, the windmill, of course, in terms of generating, water for whales. So there were a lot of different parts of things, or types of technology, of course, that was used to make farming the Great Plains easier. Now, because of that technology, farmers are going to get very good, of course, at doing their job, and that's going to be a blessing and a curse. Vocabulary, once again, write down the words that you see here in your journals. We'll try to address as many of them as we can as we go through the lesson. Lesson focus question: how did farmers attempt to improve their situation as America became an increasingly industrialized nation? All right, let's talk about the problems down on the farm. Well, new farm technology caused more farm production, which increased supply, which caused crop prices to fall in the late 1800s. We told you that farmers got real good at their job, and because they got good at their job, they were producing more. Simple law of supply and demand. If there's too much supply, prices will fall. The least amount of demand, supply, of course, will cause demand to be high, of course, and then prices will be high. Farmers started doing their job too well. Too many farm products or too many crops, not enough high prices. Populism emerged when farmers organized to influence the government support of farm issues. The Populist Party was formed to voice American farm concerns at the government level. What we're going to do is talk about some of the farm issues of the late 1800s. When you look at it, falling farm prices due to overproduction. The money supply was the core problem in the minds of many farmers. They said that they needed a currency, of course, that was backed by silver, and they wanted more greenbacks, of course, or paper money in circulation, because they wanted to create inflation. If you create inflation, that means that, of course, they could get higher prices because the money wasn't as valued. The government favored deflation, or a reduction of greenbacks in circulation that in turn lowered prices. The government paid off the National Bank note bonds and removed greenbacks, angering farmers, and the government wanted to return to a gold standard. So you have farmers on one side that want inflation, the government and businesses on the other side, of course, that want deflation. So farmers want silver and greenbacks in circulation as the money supply, and then you have businesses and you have the government that wants gold as the standard to back America's currency, and they want less money in circulation so that deflation, of course, could be created. The gold standard effects on farmers. Now, the farmers hate the idea of the gold standard. Less money in circulation means less inflation, means less prices that he could charge, of course, for his crops. The return to the gold standard would mean that there would be less money in circulation and crop prices would continue to fall because of inflation, but farm rents and mortgage entries would stay the same or increase with farm income falling. Farmers would lose their farms and move to cities or the West looking for better opportunities. Now, what did the farmer do, of course, when he wasn't being listened to by the government? Well, he started to organize. And one of the two organizations that were created, of course, to champion farm interests, was the Grange, or the Patrons of Husbandry. It was created by Oliver H. Kelly, and the purpose was to reduce competition between farmers and create cooperatives and create strategies to lower costs and increase prices for crops. In other words, it's here. What they want to do, of course, is have conversations with farmers and talk about the things that they were producing so they could produce less of those things and more of other things so that they could stabilize prices. The Farmers Alliance was another organization that was created after the Grange began to fade into the woodwork. It was created by Charles W. McCune in 1890 as the Grange faded. The purpose was to organize cooperatives in large exchanges to lobby government and affect farm prices as the Grange did. But just like the Grange, it too failed. The Populist Party. By 1890, farmers were distrustful of both major political parties because of their failure to address farm issues. The Populist Party was created by farmers to gain influence on the national stage. In 1892, they ran their candidate for president, James B. Weaver. The Populists advocated for unlimited coinage of silver, once again, currency based on the silver standard, graduated income tax, the 16th Amendment. Now, that didn't really affect the farmer, but what the farmer wanted to do was to get workers that lived in the cities to vote with them, because by doing that, what they would do, of course, is only bolster their own cause. So what they were trying to do with the graduated income tax was to pull more people into the movement. Government ownership of the railroads, and 8-hour workday, once again, something to appeal to the workers in the cities, and restrictions on immigration. And then excerpt from the Bryan's Cross of Gold speech. William Jennings Bryan becomes a candidate for president in 1896, and he says, he made this speech, he says, "You shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." This line vividly illustrated Bryan's opposition to the gold standard and his support of farmers and the working class, and the speech solidified Bryan as the Populist Party nominee in the election of 1896. And once again, it thrust him into the limelight of being one of those champions of the small man, in this case, the American farmer. In the election of 1896, you had three candidates: William Jennings Bryan from the Populists, or the People's Party. You had William McKinley, the Republican, and then Grover Cleveland, the Democrat. McKinley's favoring of the gold standard, his modest support for labor unions, and his tolerant approach towards immigrants gave him a sound victory in the election of 1896. And with the loss of William Jennings Bryan in the election of 1896, the issues for the farmer only continues to kind of spiral. Populism's legacy. McKinley's victory in the election of 1896 caused the decline of populism in America. The failure of populists to gain support of the workers in the nation's cities party influenced the decline. Populist ideas did make a comeback later during the progressive movement, when the graduated income tax was passed by an amendment, and the 18-hour workday was adopted, and restrictions were made on immigration. One of the last things, we talked about the gold standard so much, we kind of threw this in, of course, for you. One of the issues, of course, that most American businesses, of course, and the government wanted, of course, was a gold standard, or currency backed by the gold standard. In 1896, there was gold that was found in the Yukon Territory. What was interesting about this particular gold find is that it's the first time that we captured some of the video of what happened during the Klondike Gold Rush on video, and it was done by Thomas Alva Edison. And by 1899, the rush was over, and a few hundred out of 100,000 made it rich. But with that influx of gold, the American government did pass the Gold Standard Act in 1900, creating a gold standard for the nation's currency. Now, that film, and then we have a film with William Jennings Bryan, of course, and then the film, of course, on the Klondike. We do have those included at the end in the reference slides, of course, in the unit. And I encourage you to go through and look at those at some point during your own convenience, and you'll be pleasantly surprised about some of the footage. One of the factors which influenced the idea of turning to the gold standard was the discovery of gold in the Klondike. I've included one of the first recorded moving images of the Klondike Gold Rush, filmed by Thomas Edison and his new invention, a video recorder. It details the difficulties encountered and the harsh realities of mining. At this time, we will pause and allow you time to access the Klondike Gold Rush video in the video description. Enjoy the video. What we want you to do now is we want you to look at this, this activity that we've created for you. And what we want you to do, of course, is go through and answer this particular, worksheet that talks about the problems, of course, of the farmers during the Gilded Age. We'll give you about 15 to 20 minutes to go through and look at that. And then we'll come back in a few minutes and we will give you a brief overview of what some of the answers, of course, that you should have found. Okay. You should have had enough time by now, of course, to go through and look at farmers in the Gilded Age, of course, and look at some of those questions. And what we try to do in terms of looking at it is try to give you an idea of some of the things. We gave you up here an overview of what it was like for farmers, of course, in the period. And you used that, of course, to answer some of the questions down here. It says, what were the two major economic challenges faced by farmers during the Gilded Age? Well, one of the biggest ones, of course, that we talked about so much was the fact that he got real good at this job and he was producing way, way too much. And because of that, prices kind of fell. We also said that the other big issue that he had, of course, had to do with the gold standard and the silver standard. The farmer wanted the silver standard and more greenbacks in circulation, of course, and then the farmer, the business and the government did not. Once again, those questions, though, if you want to go through and look, after you submitted those, of course, your teacher, of course, can answer them, or you can go through, of course, and look at the unit, the reference section of the unit, of course, and you can look at what the possible answers, of course, could be. The lesson focus question for Unit 3, Lesson 5, the farm problems of the late 1800s. How did farmers attempt to improve their situation as America became an increasingly industrialized nation? Well, they did several things. They created cooperatives and exchanges. They increased the silver, and they tried to increase the silver and greenbacks in circulation to cause inflation. They tried to pass the graduated income tax, an 8-hour workday to appeal to workers, government regulation of ownership of railroads. Very few of these things, of course, if any of them, of course, does impact the farmer a great deal. But it's interesting to note that some of these things, of course, work their way into the progressive movement, and they eventually come around and they do provide some minor help to the farmer, of course, and then workers in America's industrialized cities. Next question, what kind of problems did farmers face in the late 1800s? And then why did popular support the Democratic candidate William Jennings Bryan in 1896? Well, low crop prices, high tariffs, increase in the mortgage interest rates, and high shipping costs from the railroads were some of the problems that the farmer faced. And it says, why did popular support the Democratic candidate William Jennings Bryan in 1896? He supported the silver standard, and increases in the circulation of greenbacks to raise inflation and crop prices. Well, once again, this kind of gives you an idea about some of the issues, of course, that farmers faced during the Gilded Age. Remember we said about Gilded Age, it was a time of great prosperity on the surface, but if you dug down and you looked real closely at American society, you find that there were some issues. And some of the issues, of course, in this case, were issues faced by the farmer. Well, once again, this is Coach Anderson from from Mississippi Public Broadcasting, U.S. History Online, 1877 to present. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research and reach your own conclusions. And with that, we'll see you next time.